Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So lots of questions for the EU negotiators as well. Guy Verhofstadt is the chief negotiator for the European Parliament. The Dutch MEP Sophy in 't Veld is his deputy, and she joins me now from Brussels. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Can I ask you, first of all, for all those people who think that Brexit is now in question, what is the view from Brussels? We've triggered Article 50. The clock is ticking. Brexit is going to happen, isn't it?
Well, it is, I think. I mean, Mrs. May has triggered the procedure. It has started. We have a period of 2 years with a possible extension of 1 year, but that would be complicated because that would require the unanimous consent of all 27 other member states. So, you know, the EU has been ready to negotiate for some time now. We are waiting for the UK, and we hope that we can start on time and follow the timetable that has been set.
And again, all this loose talk about a hard Brexit or a soft Brexit, from the EU's point of view, you want to do a deal which ensures that Britain is in a worse position than now, and therefore you want a hard Brexit.
No, we don't want the UK to be in a worse position. We regret Brexit. I mean, I personally would have preferred the UK to remain on board, but the British people have voted, so now we have to deal with it. And I think we agree with Mrs. May on one thing: Brexit is Brexit. You cannot have your cake and eat it. You know, either you're a member of the EU or you're not. Yeah. At the same time, we will still have to work together. We will still be neighbours. We all have shared interests. So we do feel that whatever, hard Brexit, soft Brexit, that we need to negotiate, let's say, as friends and good neighbours. We're not enemies. We're not antagonists. We all have an interest in a good outcome of the negotiations.
Now, clearly, the British side is in some disarray because of the election campaign at the moment. Is there any way of buying more time for these talks?
Well, I think the treaties are very clear. There is a period of 2 years starting on the day that Article 50 is triggered. That was the 29th of March. So it will be the 29th of March 2019. And as I said, there is a provision that you know, there can be a 1 year extension, but that requires unanimity. So that will be very difficult. But I mean, I think it's a bit early to start talking about extensions. I think it's time we all sit down and start the work. And I would really hope that, I mean, clearly the elections didn't produce the outcome that Mrs. May expected. You know, we just have to wait and see what kind of government will be formed. Whatever the government will be, I think, as an outsider, of course, I cannot tell the British what to do, but we really hope for a government that can command a broad and stable majority. Let's say that a kind of government that has national unity, so in order to negotiate a deal that's best for the UK and for the EU.
So, in simple terms, what would happen if the British Parliament decided it didn't want to go ahead with Brexit?
Well, nobody knows, really. That's uncharted territory. It's not really foreseen. But, you know, if the Brits were to reconsider, which, you know, I don't think that will happen, but were they to reconsider, I suppose we could talk. But still, membership of the EU, you know, there's certain rules that you have to comply with, and that goes for any member of the European Union, and that still stands.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, we were talking earlier on about Lord Heseltine. He joins us now from Oxfordshire. Welcome, Lord Heseltine. You've written an article today in which you suggest that the EU could, because of the extraordinary circumstances, offer Britain a new deal on immigration, the kind of deal they didn't offer David Cameron, and that, in some respect, could keep us inside the EU. Would there not have to be a second referendum for that to happen?
It could be, but it could be another general election. But we're going to face another general election anyway in the context of the Brexit negotiations. And the problem now, put very simply, is that Brexit is the cancer gnawing at the heart of the Conservative Party. And there's a lot of talk of changing leader, may well come to that. But it's not about changing just the leader, it's changing the policy. And why I think it needs a period of contemplation by particularly the parliamentary party is to let them think through who and what is going to be the argument of the Conservative Party that will stop Jeremy Corbyn being Prime Minister in a couple of years' time. It's as serious as that. My own view, in contrast to the European spokesman, I heard talk about the need for stability and a united view with the British government. There is no stability, there is no united view, and there's not going to be in the present circumstances. We have a government which is at the mercy of events and of parliamentary votes. And the DUP arrangement, with it comes or doesn't come, we don't know. It's certainly inherently unstable. I remember
How do you
being
feel about
in
the
these
DUP?
situations before. Well, I'm closer to Ruth Davidson than I am to Arlene Foster, and I think that will apply to large numbers of the Conservative Party. It's just not a stable relationship. It may keep together for a short period of time. There are great weaknesses in the argument, but it might keep the government there for a bit. But I don't think actually that there's any mood for a new general election. Certainly not from the Conservatives, certainly not from the Scots Nats. And Corbyn can afford to wait. He can simply, he knows, we all know, that we're in for two things. A, an economy which is not going to improve in the immediate future. And secondly, the ongoing controversy of Brexit, which will reveal just how exposed the British government is in this negotiation. So he can wait. And in the end, by-elections will give him what he needs when the public mood will be clamouring for change.
You've seen Prime Ministers come and go, including female Prime Ministers in the past. How much longer do you think this Prime Minister has?
Well, actually, I think that's the sort of stuff that Fleet Street get preoccupied by.
Kind of important.
If I could advise, if I could advise Mrs. May, I would say that one great service you could do to this party is to allow the party the time to decide its future direction. Whether she would then revert to the views she held before the referendum or stick to the one she had after the referendum on Brexit, I can't tell you. But the fact is that if the Tory party doesn't lance the boil of Brexit, then you are opening the doors for Corbyn's premiership. I disagree with the... I disagree with the European spokesman saying that the process is underway. That's a sort of bureaucratic mumbo-jumbo.
Are you not just, if I may say so,
Europe are Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron. And if they were persuaded that there was a genuine British view about immigration that could meet their own experiences domestically, then I believe that the right leader of the Conservative Party could find a deal which would keep us within the European family, but deal with the issue of immigration, which is the underlying source of anxiety.
OK, so a lot of people will be listening to this and saying, there he goes again. It's an unreconciled Remainer rubbing his hands over the chaos and hoping that somehow, after a clear referendum result, we can reverse ferret. And actually, we can't.
You know, you've just described the Brexiteers over the last 30 years. They went on and on and on. And I think my democratic right is to do just what they did and to follow Nigel Farage's advice. When he thought he was going to lose the referendum, he said there'll have to be a second referendum. Nicola Sturgeon, having lost, was until the election, talking of a second referendum. It is Parliament that is sovereign in this country. They have the power. And there is nothing sacrosanct about saying a Labour government has won a mandate, we must all get on our knees and thank God. I've spent my life fighting the decisions of the electorate electing Labour governments. In many cases we have won. It's a matter of personal integrity. It's a matter of national self-interest and sticking to your convictions.
Lord Heseltine, fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, if you believe the reports in the papers this morning, the Conservative Party is gearing up to oust Theresa May and go in a new direction. And one man who will have plenty to say on that direction, I would imagine, is one of the party's biggest beasts, Lord Michael Heseltine, who joins us now from his home in Oxfordshire. Hello, Lord Heseltine, thank you very much for being with us. So it's been an absolutely remarkable week for Theresa May. She's lost her majority, she's lost her two closest advisors. Do you think she can continue as Prime Minister?
Well, she'll never lead the Conservative Party into another election, but there's no immediate need for a change. Indeed, my own hope would be that perhaps her last service to the party would be to give it the time to think about a successor, but very much in the context of the policies of the successor. You see, you've got to face the reality that the present situation is unsustainable. The DUP may be a short-term palliative, but it's not enough of a support to last through a parliament. And what the Conservative Party has to ask itself very simply, how do we stop Jeremy Corbyn entering number 10 Downing Street? By producing a manifesto in a forthcoming general election that genuinely can appeal to young and old, north and south, across the country. There have been all sorts of assertions of unity and national interest, but actually the Conservative Party is deeply divided over the issue of Brexit. And it is absolutely fundamental for me that the new leader finds a way of genuinely trying to lance the boil that, which is of course immigration, that underlies the public anxiety.
So let me get this straight. Do you actually think that Jeremy Corbyn could be Prime Minister?
I have no doubt at all that he is a handful of seats away, and looking ahead, what do I see? I see a parliament that has not got the ability to legislate on the big issues of the time. I see an economy which will continue to deliver frustrating circumstances in probably frozen living standards. And I see one story after another about the dilemmas of Brexit. And I don't see an early general election because sorry about this thing, the opposition parties don't want it, I don't think, certainly not the Scots Nats. The government doesn't want it, and the public opinion doesn't want it. So all that the opposition parties have got to do is harry the government and wait. And the inevitable, merciless process of by-elections will create a climate in which a general election becomes possible and in which public opinion by then has moved into the traditional mid-term blues when people are crying out for a change. And this is likely to coincide with the end of the Brexit negotiations. Now, we're not going to win the Brexit negotiations. There's no way the Europeans can allow us to leave on better terms than we've got now. Why? Because other countries might take the same option. So they're not going to do it. And whatever the words, whatever the sort of promises, we've seen all this stuff, the fact is we will suffer by leaving the European Union. Now, there's one issue underneath all of this, which is immigration. And there is genuine concern. You saw Donald Trump exploit it. Sorry about this mechanism going wrong. You saw Donald Trump exploit it. You saw the problems in France and Germany. And so it is possible that the right leader of the Conservative Party could approach Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron and offer them a deal which deals with the big issues of immigration. And there are three components. First, they need to take the student numbers out. We need the students to enhance our universities, to raise the standards, and to keep us at the top of world educational standards. Secondly, they should deal with the issue of non-European immigration, which is over half. It's nothing to do with the European Union at all. And thirdly, they should accept the principle of free movement, but to look for transitional arrangements where the flow gets out of balance. In other words, they should look at a process which is very similar to that applies to the new members joining the European Union, and use that where the economies are out of balance. It would require leadership, and vision.
Lord Heseltine, you paint a very gloomy picture there, and yet it is a situation entirely of the Conservative Party's making, because David Cameron chose to call the EU referendum, Theresa May chose to call the election. Who do you blame for the situation we're in now?
I blame the economic collapse of 2008. I blame those who sought to blame the European Union for the consequences of that. I blame Nigel Farage for exploiting the immigration issue. And I'm sad to say that the Conservative Party, and to some extent the Labour Party, found themselves being dragged down this anti-European road by public opinion. But it was not the Conservative Party that created that public opinion.
But the gambles that the Conservative Party took on the referendum and also on this election were proved disastrously wrong. Certainly when with this election, Theresa May was expecting to come out with a strengthened hand, with a mandate, with a majority, and look at what's happened.
Yeah, well, we all know what's happened, but so we have to look ahead, and what I am now preoccupied by, frightened by, if I may be frank, is the fact that Jeremy Corbyn is within a handful of seats of number 10, with all the risk to the nation's defence that implies. And this is why the Conservative Party needs time to think through the policies which can genuinely attract the young and our more elderly supporters, who genuinely can sound as though they believe in the devolution of power across the United Kingdom, and who actually can show they have policies that deal with the housing and education and skills crisis, which we have to do regardless of in or out of Europe.
Now, you said a little earlier about the Conservative Party needing leadership. Who would you like to see as the next leader of the Conservative Party? There's lots of talk about Boris Johnson, for example. Would you like to see him in the hot seat?
No, you see, you miss my point. I'm interested in what they're going to say, not the personalities. The personalities, of course, are important, but it is the message. It is the cancer at the heart of the Conservative Party, Brexit, that has to be dealt with if we're going to unite this country. And I want to know who is prepared to stand up within the House of Commons and tell the British people the truth, devoid of all the empty flannel of a new world, free trade, getting out there and creating new markets. We are systematically destroying the principal market of Britain's prosperity, willfully, on our own, at our decision. And as long as you keep doing that, all this talk of greater prosperity and a new world is frankly misleading.
You say there's a cancer in the Conservative Party. Is there a risk then that if the Conservative Party doesn't get the next few months right, that cancer could be terminal?
Not terminal. The Conservative Party is the most successful democratic force in human society. They will recover, they always do, but it could perpetuate in the present circumstances the uncertainty and the economic stagnation which could give Jeremy Corbyn the keys of number 10. It is as serious as that.
Another, of course, of the big stories of the weekend and the fallout from the election is this idea of an arrangement with the DUP. How do you feel about the Conservative Party and the DUP linking up?
Well, I'm more Ruth Davidson than I am Arlene Foster, but it's a delusion, you see. The DUP, they don't have enough votes to guarantee the life of this Parliament through its full term. So they may get us through, what, to halfway through, to the erosion of by-elections, to the defections within the Conservative Party itself, erode the DUP support for a majority government. But then what happens? Then we're in a position where the public mood will be reflected in the midterm blues that always comes. There will be a desire for change. And who will be waiting? Jeremy Corbyn will be waiting. And what will be happening? We will be concluding a bad Brexit deal, the consequences of which will have adverse effects across the country, and then we get forced into a general election. This logic is staring us in the face. You have to deal with it now, not in 2 years' time.
Lord Heseltine, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Now, listening to that, the Defence Secretary in what is still May's government, Sir Michael Fallon, that was a former Defence Secretary, of course.
Yeah, indeed.
Sir Michael, was it a mistake to call this election?
No, I think the Prime Minister was right to ask for a bigger majority to open up the Brexit negotiations and to build a stronger, fairer Britain beyond that. She didn't have an elected mandate herself. She wanted a bigger majority. That hasn't transpired, and now we have to get on and make the best of it.
And she is entirely responsible for this. She decided to call the election. She made it about her. She said it's me, me, me. Lots of the country said no, no, no. And as a result, we're in a position of chaos. Therefore, the whole process has been thoroughly irresponsible, has it not?
Well, hang on a moment. You know, we supported, the Cabinet supported her in that election campaign.
So it's your fault
too? Yes, we all take responsibility, of course. She's won the most seats, 56 seats more than Labour. She's won the biggest share of the vote for 34 years. It wasn't the big majority that she wanted, that we wanted. We now have to get on and make the best of it. There is no other party that has any legitimacy or credibility in forming the government. We will now form that government with the support of the DUP.
Do you believe you won this election?
Well, clearly what happened was we did not get the large majority we wanted, but we have the largest number of seats, and under our constitution, it is our duty now, in the national interest, to form a government. We are the only legitimate party to be able to do that, and we're going to do that.
Because, you see, Theresa May said at the beginning of the campaign, if I lose just 6 seats, I will lose this election. How many seats did you lose?
Well, look, we did not get the majority in this election, of course, but we had most seats, we have the biggest share of the vote, and it now falls on us
but you
to
had
carry
a majority.
On. We had a majority,
and
sure.
now you don't.
Yes, of course, and we get the result of the election. We fully understand that, and we understand what the people are saying to us. However, the Queen's business must now be carried on. We have Brexit negotiations opening in just a few days' time. We have to continue to build a strong economy. It falls on us now to build a government in the national interest, and that is what we are working with our friends in the DUP to do.
Well, this election process has made the situation much, much worse. And it was partly because of the way the campaign was conducted. Did you feel during the campaign that the Prime Minister and other ministers were being a bit robotic, were not answering questions properly, were not engaging with the British people in the kind of vigorous conversation that we expect in election time?
Well, the Prime Minister travelled thousands of miles and took,
far more... what she did when she got there.
Well, she took far more questions from the public, actually, than Jeremy Corbyn did.
She didn't answer them, that's
well, she tried. She certainly tried to answer them. She did the television interviews and so on. But look, yes, we understand the result. It was not the result we wanted, but now we have to get on and make the best of it, and that is the work that faces us this week, and that is the work we will complete.
You say you understand the result. So what changes as a result of that understanding? What do you do differently now?
Well, clearly, a minority government requires a different approach. You've already seen some changes in personnel in number 10 Downing Street.
Do you welcome that?
I welcome that, of course. It's going to require a different approach. We're going to see, I hope, more collective decision-making in the Cabinet. I and other senior colleagues have made that clear to her. And I think you will also see that she will want to work much more closely with the parliamentary party, both in the conduct of business and in the development of policy.
So can I be absolutely clear? You have said to the Prime Minister, and your colleagues have said to the Prime Minister, you want to return to traditional cabinet government rather than government by advisers, and you want much more listening to the 1922 committee of Tory backbenchers.
Well, I'm not going into the private conversations that I and other senior colleagues have had with the Prime Minister, but I think she absolutely understands that a minority government will require a different approach, a more collective approach, and she'll want to work very closely with the 1922 committee, with the backbenchers, as I said, not just on the conduct of business, but also on the development of new policy.
So the Cabinet is back?
Well, the Cabinet, we've always had Cabinet government. We've had good Cabinet discussions, but a minority government, as I've said, is going to require a different approach and an even more collective approach than we had.
How is the Prime Minister?
The Prime Minister obviously was, you know, on Friday, I think you saw her, been up most of the night like the rest of us.
The reports that she was in floods of tears when the results came in.
I don't know about that, but clearly she'd been up most of the night on Thursday night. Don't forget, she's also, during the campaign, had to be Prime Minister. And I and other senior colleagues have had to deal with, we had the two terrorist attacks, we've had ongoing security issues. She's had to go on running the business of government as well as leading the campaign. So I hope she'll be catching up on some sleep now, but getting on with the work today of forming a new government and cementing that alliance with the DUP.
Well, let's come on to that directly. Are you trying to do a formal coalition with the DUP?
No, this is not a coalition. This is what is traditionally called a confidence and supply arrangement, whereby the DUP will support us on the big things like voting for the Queen's speech, on making sure the budget and the finance goes through. They support us on defence. On the big issues, they'll be supporting us.
George Osborne suggested it would be chaotic now because line by line by line they will be coming and arguing about things with you.
I think George is enjoying his job now as a commentator rather than a player on the pitch. We have to deal with the situation in the House of Commons that we have now. It's a minority government, but we'll be working extremely closely with the DUP. We've already started working on outline proposals so that we form a government with their support.
Can I ask you, have you got an agreement?
No, we're working on outline of proposals. Because it'd be pretty surprising if we had an agreement just in a single day.
Well, last night, when the BBC and the Press Association phoned Downing Street, we were told there was an agreement. We could go ahead and report there was an agreement. A few hours later, they confirmed that. A few hours later, again, they said, well, we're not sure. Then there was a long silence from the DUP. Midnight, there is no agreement. It already sounds, to coin a phrase, like a coalition of chaos.
No, come on. It would be very, very surprising if something as important and as complex as this was stitched together in a single day of talks in Belfast. Both sides have got to work through. But what we do have now is an understanding on the outline proposals that would underpin that working agreement. So
this is a crucial agreement. Will the public get to see it? Will you publish that agreement?
Well, you'll see the outline proposals of the agreement, sure.
So it will be published?
Yes. Well, you'll see the proposal, which is they will support us on the
really
big issues.
In terms of, they will be asking for stuff as well. They will not do this for nothing. We need to know what they're going to ask from you and whether you're going to give it to them.
Well, they'll be making a statement too. They'll be explaining what their approach to these negotiations is as well. I'm not party to the negotiations, but they will be supporting us on the big issues, the big security and economic issues that face this country, and they will be helping us go into the Brexit negotiations and get the outcome that Britain wants.
So these are your new close friends. Are you repulsed by gay people?
Well, let's be very clear. Just because they're going to support us, they're agreeing to support us on the economic issues, the big economic and security issues facing this country, it doesn't mean that we now agree with all of their views. We don't.
And you don't agree with that one? I mean, I can quote you, your new colleague, Ian Paisley Jr. I am pretty repulsed by gays and lesbianism. I think it's wrong. I think that those people harm themselves and, without a care about it, harm society. I hate what they do. And on that issue, and on abortion and women's rights and so forth, you are now in an alliance with a party which is extremely socially conservative and very, very different from the Conservative Party that David Cameron and George Osborne were trying to fashion not so long ago.
We're not in government with the DUP. We're not in coalition with the DUP. They're going to support us, as I said, on the crucial economic and security issues that face this country. We do not agree, and we do not have to agree with any of their views on some of these social issues, and I certainly don't.
Crucial economic and security issues, you said. Another big issue, of course, is the Northern Ireland peace process. And into that peace process is written that the British government has to be a neutral arbiter between the two sides, that you have to be fair and in the middle. How can you be fair and in the middle if you're relying on one of those parties, the DUP, for your very existence?
Well, we've already had a friendship with the DUP that goes back many years before,
so you're not
before this election. Well, we've already had a close relationship with the DUP. We have more in common with them than we do the other parties. But the DUP themselves want to return an executive to Northern Ireland. They have every interest in getting an agreement with the other Northern Ireland parties, and we'll continue to work on that to bring stability to Northern Ireland.
So they have very different views, not only on social issues, and we note that Ruth Davidson, for instance, tweeted that she had given a speech on gay marriage in Belfast immediately after this deal was announced. I wonder why she did that. There's a lot of people who are very, very worried in your party about their social views, even if you're not.
Well, we do not share their views on some of these social issues, and we don't have to share their views. We're not changing our policy on any of that. They are going to support us on the very big, Brexit, economic and security issues that face this country. It doesn't mean we then have to go and agree with some of the stuff that you've read out. We don't agree with that.
Well, let's carry on reading stuff out, or at least alluding to stuff, which is that you have been very, very strong in your views on Jeremy Corbyn and his connection with terrorism and all the rest of it. The DUP is supported by people like the Red Hand Commandos, the UVF. Do you regard those people as terrorists as well?
Well, the DUP has been part of the parliamentary process, part of the democratic process in Northern Ireland.
Ditto Sinn Féin.
In recent years. They've been part of the democratic process. They want a settlement in Northern Ireland. They supported the formation of the executive, and they want to see the executive back at Stormont governing Northern Ireland. So they're part of the democratic process now, whatever happened in the past.
Are you not slightly uneasy about their continuing links with those kind of groups?
Well, look, they are committed to stability and peace in Northern Ireland. They've been part of that negotiating process for many years now. They want to bring peace to Northern Ireland, and that will be something we'll be focusing on as well.
Now, one area where they definitely take a different view from the current government is over Brexit, over key aspects of Brexit. And it's not just them. Ruth Davidson, who has had a great victory in Scotland, 13 Conservative MPs now in Scotland, has made it absolutely clear that she wants, what she says, what's really clear is that the Conservative Party, having failed to win a majority, now needs to work with others. And that means we can look again at what we hope to achieve as we leave the European Union. Do you agree with that?
Well, first of all, the parties that wanted to frustrate Brexit, who don't accept the result of the referendum, were the SNP and to some extent the Liberal Democrats, and they didn't make any progress at the election. We want, as Ruth Davidson wants, a successful Brexit.
An open Brexit is her phrase.
A successful Brexit that is a new partnership with Europe, that is careful about the trade we already do with Europe, that comes to some agreement on the immigration that we can accept from Europe, and that enables us to continue to pursue new markets elsewhere.
Has there been a cabinet-level discussion of any kind so far on slightly changing our view of Brexit?
No, the new cabinet obviously will meet early next week. Our view of Brexit, I don't think, has changed. We want a partnership with Europe. We want an agreement that maximises our access to the single market, comes to an arrangement on immigration, continues the security cooperation we already have with Europe. As I say, a successful Brexit, an agreement that is in the interests of us, but is also in the interests of Europe.
And do you think you've got a majority in the House of Commons for this now?
Well, I think we have a majority for that. Yes, I think everybody wants to see an agreement in the end that does respect what the British people voted for last year, make sure that our cooperation with Europe continues, our trade with Europe continues, our security cooperation with Europe continues.
But Philip Hammond, who was in line to be sacked had you got a big majority, has already spoken to the Prime Minister and said that he wants a slightly more pro-business approach in the Brexit negotiations. Things are already moving underneath the surface, aren't they?
I'm not sure you're party to Philip Hammond's conversation with the Prime Minister, and I certainly wasn't party to it.
But you wouldn't be surprised by that.
We want to work with business on this. It is very, very important that we're careful about the existing trade we do with Europe, about access to the single market in whatever new arrangement we come to. It's also important we don't lose the cooperation between our intelligence services, between our police forces, the security cooperation we have in Europe. As I've said, we want a new partnership with Europe, and we're going to be working hard for that.
David Davis, in the small hours of the election morning, before all the results were in, said this. He said, "We want to leave the customs union and the single market, but get access to them. That's what we put in front of the people. We'll see by tomorrow whether they've accepted that or not. That will be their decision." And by and large, they haven't accepted that.
Well, the parties that wanted to frustrate the decision of the British people last year didn't make any progress. The SNP lost seats. The Liberal Democrats didn't make any progress at all.
Could you at least talk to the Labour Party, who are not, you don't list as one of the parties trying to frustrate Brexit, and have taken a more nuanced approach in terms of getting a kind of grand coalition view representing sort of 84% in that case of the British electorate. Could you not talk to them and ensure that there is a joint position?
Well, I welcome the fact the Labour Party have shifted their view now and do not seem to be calling for a new referendum. And, you know, they, like us, I hope now, want to have a successful Brexit, an agreement that works for us, that works for the European Union, that does not jeopardise the jobs and trade we do with Europe, but still implements the overall result of the referendum last year.
These are very uncertain times, and this is probably a very unfair question, but how long do you think Theresa May can last as Prime Minister?
Well, we have a duty now to form a government, to get on with the Brexit negotiations, which start in a few days' time, to continue the successful economic growth that we have. She is our elected leader, and I think you'll find the Parliamentary Party, when it meets in the early part of next week, the Parliamentary Party will rally behind her and give her support in what is now a different situation, a minority government, but working in harness with the DUP. The
former Chancellor of the Exchequer just described her as a dead woman walking.
I don't agree with that. She won, you know, the biggest share of the vote since I think the 1987 election. You know, for over 30 years. She did not achieve what we wanted, which was a bigger majority, but it is now her duty with us to form a government and to pilot this country through the Brexit negotiations.
Sir Michael Fallon, thanks very much for coming on when so many other people would not.
Thank you.